Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here is your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
My friends, will elected Republicans ever learn the lesson? Will they ever learn the lesson? Will they ever come to the realization that we are in a political fight for the survival of this constitutional republic, and the American people are not playing? The base in the Republican Party has understood this. They understand that Republicans have an unbelievable ability to snatch victory, snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Headline here, Fox News, South Carolina Republicans defy Trump, tank redistricting for now. You know that we've talked about this a lot on this program. And I know, listen, there's a lot of big issues out there to talk about. But this one that we're going through right now with redistricting or not redistricting, this is the single most important factor to determine if we're in a position to win or if we're in a position to miss opportunities, I guess, down the road. And I'm going to get into this in a moment and just talk about, again, what the people in the Republican Party who are blocking these measures do not seem to get. So we'll get to that today, my friends. Thank you for tuning in on this Thursday, middle of May. Ever wish you had a whole team to help manage your financial life? That's the beauty of Family Office Services at Full Suite Wealth. Their experienced advisors bring together everything from high-level investment management, private equity, private credit, option strategies to complex legal needs, all customized for you. It's like having a family office just for you, with people who know your story and your goals. If you're serious about planning for the long haul, check them out. FullSuiteWealth.com is their website. FullSuiteWealth.com. Build your legacy. Secure your future. Okay, let's get right into this. South Carolina Republicans defy Trump, tank redistricting for now. Trump warned he was, quote, watching closely as South Carolina Republicans voted on redistricting. I don't want to rehash some of this, but I do want to draw the parallels between what happened here in Indiana with what is about to happen at some point in the future here in the state of South Carolina. A handful of Republican state senators in South Carolina on Tuesday derailed an effort in the GOP-dominated legislature to redraw their state's congressional district map, which aims to erase the only Democrat-dominated U.S. House seat ahead of the midterm elections. 5 Republican state senators broke with their party and teamed up with Democrats to defeat a proposal that would have allowed the chamber to vote on redistricting after the South Carolina legislative session comes to a close later this week. The move came hours after President Donald Trump warned on social media that he'd be watching closely as lawmakers met to move forward with changing their state's map. The setback means it will be much harder for South Carolina to join Tennessee, Alabama, and Louisiana, which are altering their maps to eliminate Democrat-controlled congressional districts in time for the midterms when the GOP will be defending its razor-thin House majority. The southern states are the latest battleground in the nationwide redistricting showdown. At stake is which party will control the House during the final 2 years of Trump's second term in the White House. The efforts by Republicans in the southern states come in the wake of a decision by the conservative majority on the Supreme Court to slash a key protection in the landmark 1965 Voting Rights Act. The justices ruled that race should not dictate the redrawing of legislative district maps. South Carolina Republicans were trying to advance a new map that could put longtime Representative Jim Clyburn, the only Democrat in the state's 7-person House delegation, out of a job. Clyburn this past week remained optimistic he can still win re-election. I don't know why people that think I could not get reelected if they redistrict in South Carolina, he said in a CNN interview. I have a district that's about 45% African American. I have no idea what the number will be after the legislature finishes, but whatever that number is, I will be running on my record and America's promise. So, you know what happened here in my state. Many of you are from the Hoosier state. But just the quick summary is that our state tried to do the same thing, redistrict, turning 7 Republican House districts into hopefully 9. And Republicans blocked it here. Republicans blocked it in the state of Indiana. I've gone through that. I don't want to go through that again. But what I do want to do is connect the dots here. I want to say that Trump and Turning Point Action, they said, listen, we are going to try to primary these folks who made this possible, who blocked this effort in Indiana. They went after Republican state senators. They campaigned against 7 of them, and they defeated 5 of them. They defeated 5 of the 7. They were incumbents, by the way. So think about that. 5 incumbents lost their seats. Some had been there for some time. 5 of these Republican senators lost their seat in Indiana, state senators, because they voted against redistricting. And it's because of a couple of things. It's because, first of all, Trump still has, in spite of what the media wants you to think, Trump has tremendous influence over the Republican base. His base is, we're watching something that's remarkable. I've told my wife, I've told you, it's sometimes maybe hard to step out of what's happening politically in this country and to try to view it, just objectively. But if you can get to that point, just for a moment, just appreciate what you're witnessing here when it comes to the effectiveness of Trump politically, because I don't think we're going to see this again. I don't see how it's possible. Now, you could be wrong, but I think we're not going to witness something like this in our lifetimes again. This is a once in a lifetime sort of politician, and you don't have to love him or anything like that. I'm just saying he is so unique and has such a direct connection to the base, that it is unlike anything that I've seen. I've at least in modern times. I studied this stuff, and in college, I've always had an interest in this. I just do not think I don't even know who to compare it to. The thing about this guy has been impeached twice. He's been had all the problems with them going after him in the legal system. He has his mug shot. He's got they tried to bleed him when they gave him the largest civil suit settlement payment, whatever, in history. I mean, they've tried everything imaginable with this guy. And he was out of office for 4 years. There were signs. I marveled at this. People had signs up the entire time of Biden's administration, especially depending upon where you were. But I remember when we were traveling on the Truth Tour, we would drive through parts of, Kansas or whatever, and there would be these signs. And I'm not talking just a yard sign. I'm talking a big sign, a big piece of plywood, a big banner that was put up in support of Trump. for the 4 years he was out of office. And I remember even during those years on this program, it was always clear to me that Trump was going to run again. There was a time when people in the media weren't sure. Maybe they were wishfully thinking, but and he took a 4-year hiatus and he just flipped the switch back on and everything fell back into place. And it's just remarkable what he was able to accomplish. And you don't have to like him, you don't have to agree with him, but just from this perspective of someone who has been a remarkably successful politician, it is incredible. And he has an amazing connection with the base. He's different in the minds of his supporters than he is than other political candidates are. And he's got this ability to go straight to the people and get results. And so the people in South Carolina, the Republican senators, state senators in South Carolina who blocked this effort, you've been put on notice. Be prepared for what's coming. I hope you are. I hope you are prepared for what's coming. And listen, you got to say this in today's world. I'm not talking about political violence. I'm talking, obviously not that. I'm talking about having the ability, dealing with the consequences of being primaried. There's a very real possibility that these 5 state senators just signed what would amount to their resignation papers in the state Senate. And I don't know how many times this has to happen before they get the notice. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they think they're standing on principle. I'm not entirely sure sometimes what these folks are thinking. I do know that they are weak and they don't know, as my friend Micah Beckwith says, what time it is in America. And I'm going to go through that today. I've hit on that a little bit lately, but I want to reiterate this. So we're going to talk about what time it is in America today. But first, friends, if you're curious about Kratom or just trying to figure out who to trust, let me introduce you to Christopher's Organic Botanicals, a family-run company. They offer natural, lab-tested Kratom, not the synthetic junk that's given Kratom a bad name. Real Kratom is responsibly sourced. It's tested for purity. It's not a synthetic. And that's what Christopher's is all about. They work directly with farmers in Indonesia. They follow the same traditions that have been trusted for generations. There are no gimmicks. There are no shortcuts. Just clean, honest alternative for people looking for a more natural way to support their health. So do your research. If you think this is a good fit for you, start with their Kratom Starter Pack. It's a great way to begin. Coupon code Todd Huff is going to save you 10% off your first order. Again, that's coupon code Todd Huff. It's my full name, squeezed into one word there. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Okay, so I mentioned the people that are supporting this. I should say people who are, how you want to look at it, opposing redistricting. I mentioned that they don't understand what time it is in America. They haven't recognized that America is in the midst of what I call a cold civil war. This is a deep, deep, deep political divide. This is not simply political differences anymore. These are things that are fundamental differences. These are issues about the nature of truth, the role of government. This isn't just how much tax should be applied to this, that, or the other. This isn't simply differences on how Democrats and Republicans approach managing different parts of government. These are fundamental, deeply divisive issues. One side, and I'm speaking specifically about the godless radical left, they are atheists. The godless radical left, to them, they are God or government is God. They don't like truth as God created it, and they are at war with it. They are trying to change it and redefine it before our very eyes. And I call this a Cold War. I grew up during the Cold War. I was a child of the I was born the last day of 1977. So I don't remember the Carter days when Carter was president, fortunately being defeated by Ronald Reagan in the election of 1980. But I remember President Reagan as a young kid. I grew up in the 1980s, and I have to tell you, I don't know, and maybe everybody feels this way, but I don't know if there was a better time to grow up as a kid. The 1980s were amazing. I love the 80s. You know, I'm kind of part of that last generation that didn't have technology crammed down my throat. We were still able to be independent. We were still able to go outside and play and drink out of the water hose and all that sort of stuff, right? Some things we did that you wouldn't dream of letting your kids do today because of the changes in culture or whatever, the risks or our awareness of those risks or just any number of things. In fact, our kids are, two of our three kids are teenagers now. The youngest is about to be. And it's interesting, the things I think back that I did in high school. And I don't mean necessarily even things that would have gotten me in trouble, just things that I did that I wouldn't let our kids do today. And I had great parents. I don't want you to think anything like that. It's just a different world. And but I remember too, of course, growing up in the glory days of the 1980s, it wasn't all just fun and games. Some of it was legitimately terrifying. And as a kid, I don't know if you just get used to things. Kids are resilient. Maybe we don't understand completely. But I mean, it was regularly discussed on the evening news: nuclear proliferation, nuclear war. There were movies about these things, right? War with the Soviet Union, Red Dawn, and different things like that. In the movies, the Soviets were always the bad guys. America was the good guys. Some people don't like that framing. I think it's absolutely necessary. I think it's absolutely true. Not that we individually were better, but what the Soviet Union stood for, Reagan called it the evil empire. It absolutely was the evil empire. It was a godless, morally bankrupt society. And I grew up in that world. Now, the Cold War, I say we have a cold civil war on our hands today. We had a Cold War between two superpowers back in the 1980s, and we were fighting and jockeying for position, but there really weren't any shots fired. We came close a couple times, really, really close. You think back to the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s. You think there were a couple of instances where we were unsure if there was a missile strike. Well, not a strike, but a potential missile launch from the Soviet Union. I know one time the closest I think the world ever came to nuclear war was they were getting warnings that we had fired a missile, and one of their commanders ignored what the system was telling him and was trusting, I don't know, his instincts or something, and it was a false alarm. We easily could have gone into nuclear war a few times. I had a dear friend of mine who recently passed away last year, but he was in the U.S. Army in the 1980s. He was stationed in Germany, in Europe, Western Europe. He was part of a Pershing missile team. It was a short-range missile system. And he would tell me their training. He would tell me they would go into the forests or whatever of Germany and with these mobile missiles, and they didn't know during training if it was the real thing or not. If we were really going to nuclear war or not. I don't know if these were short-term nuclear. I don't know enough about it, but I do know he told me, we would set the missile up, and he said when they got it set up, their training was they just ran because they knew that they were going to get struck, right? If in fact it wasn't just a test, and they would take off running just to flee that area to try to somehow cling on to the very unlikely possibility that they wouldn't be able to survive. I mean, that was the world that we grew up in the 1980s. But what's interesting is everybody knew. We may not have understood it, but Americans knew the risk. Americans knew what we were up against. Of course, there were people who had a love affair with the Soviet Union, and I think that may be what these Republicans are like. The people who just maybe have a secret affection for, in this cold Civil War, they have a secret affection for the Democrats, or they romanticize it, or maybe they just simply don't know what we're up against. But, my friends, we are up against an enemy domestically. And listen, I don't mean we have to defeat these folks politically. I'm absolutely against political violence, and I know these things have to be discussed, very straightforward in today's world. But this is, we have a great domestic opposition that we have to defeat politically, and it is the Democrat Party. And there's competing visions of truth, of freedom. Friends, when I was in college, and this is always in the back pocket of people on the left, but there are people out there, I kid you not, you'll find this if you Google it, I'm sure, but there are people out there that want to rewrite the Bill of Rights. They don't want the Bill of Rights to tell you what the government cannot do to you. They want a new version of the Bill of Rights that says, here's what the government owes you, basically. Right? And that's where you get Bernie Sanders and AOC and people out there, these leftist lunatics, these communists or whatever you want to call them, who think the government exists to provide for people, to give them certain guarantees, entitlements. This is where the rights to things like health care and a livable wage, all these things are good, but they're not rights. I've gone through this ad nauseum. And so you've got this framework where you have two different versions of reality, of truth. That's another important one. In the version of truth that I live in, which is, by the way, there's not versions of truth. There is the truth. There's people's perspectives on what the truth is, but this is, truth is what is. And we are here in this country. We are citizens, not subjects. It's been recognized that our rights come from our Creator, not from our government. These things matter tremendously, and they stand completely at odds with the wrong version of truth and freedom, if you will, that's adopted, believed by the radical left. I've got to take a time out, though. Quick time out, my friends. We'll continue after the break. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Been talking here about, just how unaware some Republicans are. Talking specifically about Republicans in South Carolina, 5 of them, in fact, who have blocked redistricting efforts in the Palmetto State. Right? So you have Republicans there, who want to redraw the state's districts to hopefully gain one more seat in the upcoming midterm elections there, get one more seat for Republicans to ensure victory. Listen, people don't understand or appreciate what's at stake here. A Democrat House is going to lead to nothing but obstruction, nothing but impeachment and hearings, just shenanigans is what it's going to be. It's not holding truth to power. It is obstructing. It is trying to make a mountain out of a molehill, is trying to take Trump down. It's an extension of what I've talked about on this program for a long time, which is the Seinfeld-Newman strategy. If you're a fan of Seinfeld, they want to keep Trump, do whatever it takes, as long as it takes them, so long as it takes Trump out of the White House. If they can't get him out of the White House, they at least want it to create a scenario where he cannot be politically effective. That is what's going on. That's their objective, and that's why Republicans have to take action here. Because, again, we've reached the point where we're no longer talking about politics. These are not political issues anymore. These are fundamental aspects of the role of government, the worldview that this nation has, and so forth, the nature of truth. These are fundamental things. And I said that we have two greatly, vastly different versions of these things. One of them is rooted in lies, which is, of course, the worldview of the radical left. The other is rooted in truth, is rooted in the founder's vision for this great nation, and so forth. And we have to fight for this. And politics is the battlefield, is one of the battlefields. It's not the only one, but it's perhaps the most immediately important one, because these are the people that are going to be implementing policies or passing laws or whatever that are going to be taking us in a certain direction. And we cannot afford to take one tiny little, you can't slide your feet in the wrong direction. We have to about face in this nation and candidly completely turn from some of the things that we have been doing over the course of time. I'm not referring to what we've been doing under Trump. I'm talking about what we've been doing as a nation for a large part over the past 50 years. We have to change the trajectory. Government cannot continue to grow. The nature of truth cannot be redefined. All these sorts of things. We need to march heading in the right direction. And politics is one of those battlefields. And that's why, listen, everybody doesn't have a heart for this. I know back in I remember talking about this in 2016. We're approaching, here in a couple months, by the way, our 11th year of this program. It's hard for me to believe. 2015 is when we launched, August 10th, 2015. Here we are, 2026. And I remember talking about the 2026 election. I remember coming to this microphone and pleading with people listening to my voice, pleading with people who said to me, who I had heard from directly or had seen comments on whatever, social media, read articles, whatever. People who said, I can't wait for this election to be over so we could go back to normal. Remember, that was Hillary versus Trump. And I said, my friends, you don't understand what you're saying. This is the new normal. We either win this war or we lose it. We either win this battle for determining the direction of this country, or this country heads in a direction and at some point heads in the wrong direction and reaches a point at some point along that trajectory, which is not far from this point. I don't know how far it is, but it's not far, where it's there's no turning back. It's the point of no return. It's like being on a flight from LA to Hawaii, and you reach the point where you have to continue the flight. You can no longer turn around, right? In fact, that happened to me. I was on a flight. This is in 2001 from LA to Kona, which I love Kona, Hawaii, but 45 minutes over the Pacific. I kid you not. And I noticed I pay a lot of attention on aircraft. I'm kind of a aviation nerd, and I'm not always the best flyer. But anyway, I noticed that the sun was on one side of the aircraft, and we were turning, and before long, you could see the sun coming in, the windows on the other side. We'd made a very, very dramatic turn, and a few moments later, they came on the PA, and all they said was this. They said, ladies and gentlemen, the pilot has informed us he's turning the plane around and going back to Los Angeles. And then they hung up the speaker or whatever, the microphone. And, of course, that was a little bit unnerving. They didn't give us any information. They didn't act like, what was it, serious? I mean, it was serious enough to turn around. Anyway, but we got back safely, obviously. But I will tell you this, there were people that were crying when we landed. They did not get back on the aircraft. In fact, the people I was sitting directly next to, they did not get back on that plane. Probably because it really wasn't, it was just, you were uncertain as to what was going on. But it was an interesting 45 minutes to an hour as we got back to Los Angeles. But the point here is that you reach a point where you can't do that, right? You can't just turn around. You've got to finish the flight. There's not enough fuel to return, or whatever the case may be. You've cut off that option. And there's a point there's a point where we've gotten too far to fix it. We're not there yet, but when the left is in charge, we certainly walk in that direction. So, we hear about things in our culture. We have a war on women, they tell us. War on everything. War on reproductive health care, which is the most sanitized way and deceiving way that they can possibly talk about killing unborn babies and child sacrifice. But this is the real war that we have in America, is the war on truth. The war on truth. And I am talking about media narratives where they lie about things that happened, deceive us, present them in such a way so as to make it look like it's one thing when it's really not. I am talking about that, but I'm talking even more. It's not just about the propaganda and the media narratives, though it is. It certainly is about those things. But it's about the conditioning, right? Emotional conditioning to where people, there's a lot of people out there who have been completely stirred into a frenzy over by the media. Their hatred for Trump is so strong, and they don't even know why. They don't know why. I don't know if you've probably seen some of these people, these man on the street interviews. They're infuriated at Trump, and they don't know why, or they can't articulate it. They can't stand that you voted for Trump or whatever, right? It's emotional conditioning. And yes, there's control of the narrative, which makes it harder to get things done when the so-called media, the free press, that's really in quotation marks, is out there telling people one thing. Trump's trying to do another, but it doesn't match with the narrative, so there's opposition there. There's a lot of problems with the media. But I think perhaps the biggest problem, when I talk about a war on truth specifically, I think the biggest problem is the redefining of things. We have reshaped our culture and society. Listen, I'm not a guy who goes back and says, hey, these days were perfect in the 1950s or whatever decade. This is how it should have been. There are things that are wrong with lots of times throughout American history or the world history of the world. But what I am saying is that there have been times when people have understood truth better than they do today. We've got a world that's totally lost. As a kid, I just, looking back, you could never have convinced me that people would believe the things that they believe about life today, that boys can be girls, that girls can be boys, the lies that feminism has taught an entire society. It is sad to me. And you see some of these women who have, gotten older to the point where they don't know if they're ever going to be married and have a family, and they're upset because they bought the lie. You see some of these women. You see people who've had trans operations. They've changed their gender, and they regret that for the rest of their lives because they bought these lies. And my, oh my, it destroys people's lives in some cases. And that's what I'm talking about. I think that those are the most damning things, when they get people to believe fundamental, absolute truths are lies, and they start believing other things. And they believe them strongly enough, these lies strongly enough, that they will change and they will abandon the moral code that is programmed into humanity. They just... It's sad. It's sad to watch. So I've got to take a break. Out of time this segment, my friends. Sit tight. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third final segment of the program today, talking about just how much some Republicans are clueless about what time it is in America, my friends. It is something to behold. We're talking specifically, I guess the springboard into this discussion was the reports that earlier this week, South Carolina Republicans voted against, 5 of them anyway, prevented the state from moving towards redistricting. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for this. I've shared before that there's Republicans that aren't conservative enough. There's Republicans who are just wimps. And I think some of them truly don't know what time it is. They don't really understand what we're up against. And that's what we've kind of been exploring here today. And that's where I want to continue taking us to the end of this program. But let's face it, there are a lot of companies out there that do not share your Christian values. It's not just that they don't share them. They fight against them in some cases, my friends. But the good news is that you do not have to invest in them. At 4-8 Financial, they specialize in biblically responsible investing. They'll help you screen out companies that go against your faith, your values, and create a plan that's tailored to your specific goals. They handle all the heavy lifting. They do all the analysis. They do all the research and comparative stuff to tell you these are the things that these companies are supporting and standing for and so forth. All you have to do is take a quick and easy assessment to find out if your current investments align with your values, or better yet, to what degree they do. So to take that assessment, it's quick, it's easy, it's something you can do right now. 48financial.com/Todd. That's where you go. 48financial.com/Todd. 48 Financial, because your values matter, and my friends, so does your money. Okay, so we know that we've talked about the war on truth. We've talked about politics being the battlefield, one of the main battlefields, and this is not going away. This fight that we're having is going to require one of the sides to win. And we have to fight to win. Again, this is metaphorical language. This is obviously not a call to real violence, but this is a call to fight with all of the legitimate resources and strategies at our disposal. And by the way, one of those includes redistricting. You don't have to like it, but I've been through that as well. Redistricting is it's not immoral to do. I don't know where people think the moral place to draw a district line is. I don't know why people think the people drawing the district should go out of their way to ensure that the party that is out of power, especially when that party is responsible for bringing in so much destruction to the country, to individual human lives by lying to them and pushing things like the trans agenda and so forth. I don't know why people think that the party in power needs to go out of its way to make sure that those lunatics have people to elect. Listen, if the Democrat Party wants to win elections, they can present, or they can, I guess you could say, nominate people who are not lunatics. How about that? How about you change your party's platform? How about you quit killing babies? How about that? How about that as a starting spot? How about you quit embracing communism and absolute godlessness and lawlessness? How about that? How about you quit giving us things like open borders? How about you quit defending people who are in this country illegally, and even people who are in this country illegally who have murdered people? How about that? How about as a starting point, you don't blame America for creating terrorists that hate us and want to kill us? How about that? How about those being the starting points? And as I've shared before, when you redistrict across the state, you're actually diluting, in this case, Republican votes. You're spreading Republican votes over more districts, and so in theory, more of these states, districts can be competitive. But again, that's not the narrative. They want to be able to control the seat. It's just, you can't have a discussion with these people. Again, I've opened up this program. I welcome anyone who hears my voice to come on here and to tell me why I'm wrong on this. I've gotten exactly 0 people who want to do this. I will be very nice. I'm going to ask questions I don't think you can answer. And I'm going to insist that you do. And people, I think, they know that, and they realize that there's really no leg to stand on. This is a political preference. When you get down to it, it's a political preference. It's a political choice. Districting or redistricting is a political decision. That's it. It's politics. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. And it's about time that we in the Republican Party start using the legitimate tools at our disposal to engage in this fight for political power in the cold civil war that we find ourselves in. The results, my friends, the results of losing this are unacceptable. We have to win. We have to simply do the things that are necessary to win this battle. Anything that's legal, ethical, moral, I'm on board with. That includes, by the way, redistricting. I got other things that I would like to get to, of course, but the time precludes me from doing that today because I am hearing music in my headphones. So it is time to wrap up today. Friends, I appreciate you tuning in. It's always good to be here. Thoughts, questions, feedback, all that can be sent to 317-785-1030. But I've got to run. SDG.